You're listening to the ONESREADY podcast, a team of Air Force special operators forged in combat with over 70 years of combined operational experience, as well as a decade of selection instructor experience. If you're tired of settling and you want to do something you truly believe in, you're in the right place. Now here's your host, former Prep Course Ops Superintendent and current Special Reconnaissance Training Guru, Trent Segmiller.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the ONESREADY podcast. You're in the team room. Thanks for joining us today, and thanks for all your support throughout the years. We certainly appreciate it. We wouldn't be able to do it without you. Today we're joined by the Air Force Special Operations Command Senior Enlisted Leader, Chief Corey Olson. Command Chief Olson provides strategic vision on an enlisted level for Air Force Special Operations Command, and he has a long history spanning over 30 years in the Air Force, and most of his time spent in Air Force Special Operations Command or doing some kind of project within Special Operations. So without further ado, please enjoy the episode. Chief Olson, welcome to the ONESREADY podcast. We appreciate you coming on. And we, like I said before, we want to be respectful of your time. So we'll get right into it. And then I'll just record the other intro after all this. So again, welcome. We really appreciate you coming on. A lot of folks that, if you're not familiar with what our demographic is, we've got an age range from about 15 to 25-year-olds, from high school students that are looking to join AFSOC War or the Air Force in general, join the AFSOC team. And we also have some folks that have gone, the NSW route or the Usaf route. So we've got a good mixture of folks that are just looking for good mentorship, advice, and kind of what AFSOC as a whole is doing in the future. So if you don't mind, give a little bit of your background, however detailed you want to go. It's fine. If you want to stay under the veil of AFSOC, and we could do that. But a lot of folks want to know a bit about you, and on to you.
Okay. Well, thanks. Let me start out with first, thanks for having me on today. I really appreciate it. And thanks for taking the time. I know we had to reschedule one other time, and my apologies for that. And Peaches, to your question. So I've been in the Air Force for 30 years, over 30 years now, but the majority of that time is in AFSOC, right? 20 plus years in AFSOC. Started out in Air Mobility Command and then came over to AFSOC. The majority of my AFSOC time up until about 6-7 years ago was inside of the data mass side of the house. And for your viewers that are out there, data mass really means, hey, we just don't put all the information out there about what you do and where you do it and who you do it with. And so not trying to put a veil of secrecy on it. It just is what it is when you look at it through that lens. But I'm an aircraft loadmaster by trade. So I'm a flyer by trade is what I do. And so I grew up doing that from the time I was a staff sergeant, really till I was a senior master sergeant. And then I came to the headquarters Air Force Special Operations Command staff, where I worked in the A3 operations directorate. Did that as a functional manager, managing the loadmasters, and then eventually kind of leading the directorate for a period of time. After that, I left to go be a group superintendent at a data master organization. Did that for a couple of years. And then I didn't know what I was going to do after that, but I can offer to you that I never planned to be a command chief like I am today. That was not an aspiration of mine. And when I got to that crossroad where they go, hey, Corey, so what are you going to do next? And I go, I'm doing it. What do you mean, what am I going to do next? I'm loving it. And the problem is I had only about 20, 21 years in at that point. And they go, well, you can't do that for the next 9 or 10 years. And I said, I can't. So at that point, I was reminded that, hey, have you thought about what's next? And I said, not really. They said, what do you think about being a command chief? And I was like, I hadn't really put any thought into it, frankly, because where I grew up, we didn't grow up with a command chief internal to us. The only command chief we had was the Air Force Special Operations command chief. So I obviously knew the individual, but didn't know what they did. And so my view was, why would I want to go do that? And then so as I got schooled up a little bit, I was like, okay. And the words that were kind of given to me was, hey, if you want to make a change for a lot of people, get a seat at the table. And so as I kind of dug into that, I realized what they were talking about was, hey, take all your education, training, and experiences and make it better for all the other people. And so at that point, I went all in and said, okay, I'm interested in becoming a command chief, not knowing how that would play out. And in the end, it played out favorably, and I made the list. And then I went on to the 58th Special Operations Wing out at Kirtland Air Force Base under Air Education and Training Command. That was my first time in Air Education and Training Command, other than basic training and the like. Really, really enjoyed that job. I got to understand the institutional side of our Air Force. Did that for a year and a half. And then I came to the first Special Operations Wing here at Hurlburt Field, where I was the command chief for just under 2 years. And then, believe it or not, I put in my papers to retire. And I did that because my mom had gotten ill. My dad had already passed on. And so what I've always known about throughout my time in the Air Force, my family is more important than the Air Force. The Air Force does not trump that. And now where my error in that was I didn't really discuss that with anybody. I didn't discuss that with the AFSOC command chief at the time. I'd only talked to my immediate boss, who at the time was Colonel Sean Farrell, now Major General Sean Farrell. And he said, hey, do what your heart's telling you to do. And so I put in my papers to retire. And so I get a couple phone calls that weren't very nice about why I'm retiring because of the amount of effort people had put into me. And I was like, ooh, I probably could have handled this a little bit better. So the moral of that part of the story is, communicate up, down, laterally, and often. And I did a poor job of that. And so a couple weeks later, really what happened was I got a call from the Chiefs group, for all the Chief Master Sergeants out there, that's who handles all of our assignments. And they said, hey, why are you retiring? And I said, hey, I'm retiring because my mom is ill, and I think it's the right thing to do to go take care of my mom. And they said, hey, well, where does your mom live? I said, well, my mom lives in Wisconsin. That's where I'm originally from. And they offered, well, if there was a job in Wisconsin, would you take it? I said, well, I wouldn't rule it out. I'm not leaving the Air Force because I don't like the Air Force. I'm leaving because my family's more important. And so a week or two later, I got a call back from the Chiefs group, and they said, hey, we found you a job in Wisconsin. And if you've ever been to Wisconsin, it's not, full up with a lot of military folks. And so I was, waiting with bated breath on what this great job was going to be. And they said, hey, we found the job in recruiting. And I started chuckling, not because I had anything against recruiting. I started chuckling because I said, now you and I both know I don't know the first thing about recruiting. And they said, it's not about what you know about recruiting, it's about taking care of people. And they said, hey, you could go there and you could take care of people and offer your, experiences to the force. And I said, okay, let me talk to my spouse and I'll get right back to you. I talked to my wife and she's like, absolutely. So off to recruiting we went, where I spent about a year doing that. And then we got my mom situated. My mom's doing great today. And then after that, I went off to be the command chief in Afghanistan for about 13 months. Came out of there, went to headquarters United States Special Operations Command, where Peaches and I met in Tampa. I was the headquarters superintendent there for about a year, and then came to headquarters AFSOC to be the command chief about 2.5 years ago. And so if you put all that together, I don't know if it makes you a MAGCOM command chief, but that's what got me here today. But I didn't do it on my own. I had a lot of people helping me. And so that's really the thumbnail sketch of how I got here in 30 years, if you will.
Jeez. Well, you bring up a good point, and I want to make sure that we address it, because you kind of hear the old trope that, hey, within the military, not just the Air Force, but you're at the end of the day, you're a number, which sounds very, non-empathetic and harsh, but I think the Air Force, is, in particular, SOCOM and AFSOC, actually do a really good job of taking care of people, or trying to find ways to help people while still, retaining talent, because, we kind of pride ourselves on talent management, and it doesn't always work out. That's just the reality of it. It does not always work out, but, at the unit now, at the 2-2, I can think of 2 humanitarian assignments that happened within, I think, 2 months. Getting the folks out here, it was unexpected. And then, they filed for humanitarian, they got it approved, and, the Air Force moved them out, and it was fantastic, and it works out well for them. So that's pretty awesome that you had the same experience with that, Chief.
Yeah. I think, to your point on that, Peaches, the great thing about our Air Force is we talk about it like it's a mythical creature, but it's really just people. Right. And it's people who want to take care of people. But, like I learned in my situation, people can't help you if they don't know. Right. They can't help you if you don't know. And so once people knew what I was doing, people jumped into action to help me. They didn't need to. They didn't need to do anything. They could have said, hey, he put his papers in, sayonara, brother. And they didn't do that. And so I think we always have to keep that in mind that, hey, there's not a conspiracy theory of the mythical creature. It's all of us, and it's the relationships that we hone and we sow through time. And it comes back. And like you said, sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, because like everything in life, timing matters, right? Timing and opportunity always matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I think that the Chiefs group is actually more secretive and ninja-like than those data master organizations that you've worked for, as far as I can tell. I don't know how they do anything, but they work magic, and it's incredible.
Yeah, and I think to your point, I mean, it is kind of magical and ninja-like at times, and people forget that the Chiefs group itself is about 5 people. It's not, a bunch of people in there, right? It's a chief, an E8, and I think 4 or 5 E7. So let's just call it, 6, 7 folks, right? But when you're only managing, I say only, when you're taking care of about 2,600 chiefs, it's a lot easier than our Air Force Personnel Center that's trying to manage 270,000. Right. And so I think we can expect a little bit more one-on-one and a little bit more care directly. But once again, it's what you have done with that relationship through time. If you weren't very good to it, it might not be very good to you. Right. So and I think that I was a beneficiary of not lighting the place on fire, if you will.
This entire time, I thought it was some smoke-filled cloak and dagger place, but I guess not.
Yeah, I hope you don't disappear after giving away their secrets. Just saying.
Well, Chief, you brought up that you were the command chief in Afghanistan, and we're out of Afghanistan now. We spent the better part of 20 years over there doing good work through some very political times, a lot of combat, a lot of lull as well in the combat and action and stuff like that. And, AFSOC has been, to brag, right? AFSOC as a whole has been kind of at the forefront of operations in Afghanistan and other locations, but specifically Afghanistan. And I know that we're kind of in a transformational transition period right now. So in your opinion, and I'm going to broaden the question. Instead of it's not just enlisted, but AFSOC as a whole. Like, how do we, in your words, become the AFSOC that we need?
Yeah, great question. And, this is something that Lieutenant General Slife, the AFSOC commander, and I have spent the last 2.5 years on. Obviously, we weren't out of Afghanistan at that point, but we knew, some of these things were going to come to an end at some point, right? And so as you look at that, and you look at the AFSOC strategic guidance that really is coming up on at the end of this month will be 2 years ago that was put out. And you look at the lines of effort in there between develop, organize, and equip. All of that is to figure out where we need to go in the future, right? Because we can't just say, hey, the last 20 years we were uber successful, and so therefore that works. So let's just keep it going in the future. And I think to that point, Peaches, as I look at it, I do want to touch on the 20 years in Afghanistan for just a second, right? I know there are folks out there that have differing views on why we left, how we left, and the like. That's not my job to comment on, but what I will say is the Air Force Special Operations Command that I was a part of for 20 years, and the blood and the treasure and everything else that we spent in Afghanistan was not for nothing, right? Everybody was doing what they were asked to do by their nation, right? And every task we were given, we did. Right. And so whatever political decisions are made, those are beyond us. I don't get involved in those. I always tell people I'm the go do guy. You tell me to go do, I go do. And that's what we do for our nation. And so my hat's off to everybody who served over the last 20 years, not just in Afghanistan, but Iraq and all over the globe. We appreciate their service, and they've done more than 99% of America has done on that front. And so I want to take the time to make sure we highlight those people, and to our Gold Star families and the like. Hey, you're not forgotten in this. You're just not. And so I think that's important. But as we look to the future, right, of what is the AFSOC we will need, we've had a lot of stuff going on over the last 2 years, and so I kind of hit on the 3 lines of effort as you look at develop, organize, and equip, right? And really they're not in the order like, hey, you got to do develop, then you got to do organize, and then you got to do equip, because really it starts with organize. Right? You got to organize yourself the right way before you can start developing the right way, right? And equipping the right way. And so as we kind of look at it, and really this is probably more for your audience, it really comes home when you think of special tactics or the special warfare training enterprise. And what I mean by that is the work that's been done by that enterprise for not just the last 20 years, but since the inception has just been incredible. But it's always evolved, right? It's evolved with a lot of talent and agility, right? And so as we look to the future, this same formation is going to be more valuable in the future than I will say it was the last 20 years, right? Because we're going to really get into what is truly special operations, right? Some of the stuff we were doing over the last 20 years was commodity activities, right? These were things that other parts of our formation could have done, maybe not as well, maybe not as fast, or maybe not as agile, but they could have done it, right? Maybe not in the early days, but certainly as time went on. And so as we look to the future of AFSOC and we look at what is our competitive advantage, we know that's our airmen, right? But we know that with our airmen and their competitive advantage, we are flexible, we are agile, and we're great problem solvers, right? And so, but if we don't align the force correctly and look at all the things that we've done or haven't done, then all we're doing is, hey, that's just the way we've always done it. Well, that's never been satisfying to any of us. Nobody's ever liked that when they heard that inside of a unit, right? And so as you look at those three lines of effort, I think it's key, especially on the organization side, right? As you look at this, the force generation model, right? All of Air Force Special Operations Command is learning from Special Tactics on this. Special Tactics has been doing this for 10 years, right? The rest of AFSOC is coming along now, right? You look at our new command and control model, which is part of organization. Really, that was brought in from the Special Tactics enterprise. And so I think what happens sometimes as we talk about the future, I think Special Tactics at times can feel like, hey, we're not as relevant in the future operating environment. And my argument is that's absolutely not true. The Special Tactics enterprise is going to lead AFSOC into the future, right? Because of all the things we've learned. Now, what we do have to do is we have to look at those things, whether it's the future ground operator. What does that look like, right? There's been a lot of talk inside of the community of, hey, what are we doing with that? Where are we at on that? What's going to happen with that? I can tell you, we've had, process teams working through this. We've had different insights to this. And the reason we haven't brought it to the unit level yet is because this is truly headquarters work right now. Right? It's headquarters work now, right? Now, I know if I'm inside of the unit, I want to be a part of that, right? Because I believe that, hey, I can help shape that future. But what we need to make sure our operating force does is that they are honed and skilled on what we need them to do every single day, right? Whether that's counter VEO, right? Whether that's crisis response, we can't all run to what the new thing is in the NDS of, hey, let's look at the 4+1 and everything else. And I think we've got a lot of people that want to do that. But what we need our folks to do now is, especially in the Special Tactics enterprise, let's think about this. For the last 20 years, it was deploy, come home, reset, deploy, come home, reset, right? And now we have a chance really to build some resiliency, spend some time with our families, hone all of our training, not just, what we're going to do in those parts of the world. And so I think what I really ask of our people is take this deep breath while you got it, right? To get all your stuff together inside of your units, at your houses and everything else, because the world's not slowing down, but we need to take this tactical pause here that's been presented to us to do that. Meanwhile, while still maximizing our education, training, and experiences, right? And so as I look at what is the AFSOC we will need, hey, we know what the National Defense Strategy says. We know who our strategic competitors or whatever the latest term may be for that. Right. And I say that not pejoratively. I say that because depending on what verbiage comes out in the National Defense Strategy next month, that's what we'll all glom onto and that's what we'll use. But at the end of the day, all we want from everybody is we need you to do the job that you've been given. I don't need you to do the job of the AFSOC commander. Right. The AFSOC commander will guide us and help us get there. But none of these decisions are being made in a vacuum. Right. And so there's a lot of teams going on. And I just ask for people's tactical patience on this as we work through it, because we're building the force for 10 years from now, not the force for 10 days from now. Does that make sense to you?
No, it does. And I appreciate the answer. And I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but I would love to maybe dive in if you wanted to on the whole future ground operator. But I don't know if that's appropriate because you're right. It is MAGCOM work right now. But I mean, you nailed it. So many guys at my unit, to include myself, want to dive into that, want to help problem solve that, want to help shape what that's going to look like. So like I said, I don't know if you'd like to get into that or not, just because it's in its, infancy stage.
Yeah, Peaches, I'm happy to talk about it to some degree, right? Because what I don't want to do is get out in front of Lieutenant General Slife on any of this, right? Because there's a lot of things where decisions haven't been made. There's just a lot of thoughts on the table, to look at what we should or should not do, right? And I think as you guys are probably aware, Colonel Stu Parker is the one who's been leading this, lifelong special tactics officer, right? And then part of his team has been Nate Hogue and Captain Morgan Mosby and others, right? And so there's been numerous ST folks inside that, along with others, right, who may see it differently, much like when we talk about diversity and inclusion, right? This is a great place for that because you need people that see the problem set differently, not the way you may have always seen it, right? And I realize that's not in the normal sense of how we normally talk about diversity and inclusion, but I think, this is diversity, this is cognitive diversity and experiential diversity we're talking about here. And so as they've kind of walked through this, they've come up with a couple different models of do you end up having one core specialty inside of AFSOC, much like we have with combat controllers and special reconnaissance, right, where they don't exist anywhere else but inside of AFSOC. I realize you have a few in AETC, but you get the gist. The majority is right here, unlike our pararescue and TAC-P, who are here in ACC and in other places, right? And so we're looking at that, and then do you bring in another piece to that main core that kind of brings in some really functional expertise, right? That, hey, you don't need to be in that unit full time, but we bring you in, we bring you out to get you developed doing other things. And then you've got what, you guys often think of as combat mission support, and what does that look like going forward, right? And so as we kind of look at all this, we're trying to figure out in the future, what is the right thing we need to do for the nation, right? Because what we don't need is we don't need more Navy SEALs, we don't need more Green Berets, and we don't need more Marine Raiders, right? Those are already covered down in the places that they are. And so what we don't want to do is be duplicative, right? And that doesn't mean that our people couldn't do it or do it better. They absolutely could do it, and in some cases do it better. But that's not what the nation's asking of us. So as we continue to flesh this out, this is absolutely going to get to the 2-4 SAL and the special warfare training, and we're going to work through this together. This is not going to be done on the third floor of AFSOC, slap the table and hand out the marching orders. That's not where we are. But this is hard, right? This isn't easy because we need to make sure what we're doing is the right thing going forward. But the most important thing, no matter what we do, is that if we build the people with the right attributes and skills, they will have the flexibility and agility to change to whatever we need them to do. Right. Somebody had said to me a few weeks ago, I was in a session and I think it was a special tactics operator, but I'm not exactly sure. We may not know what the force of 2035 needs to look like, but as long as the force of 2033 can adapt to 2035, we built it right. And I think that's where we need to be, right? Because no matter what, we won't get it exactly right because we're never able to predict the future the way we want to. I mean, history has shown us that. So Peaches, I don't know if that gets to what you were asking or if that gives you a little bit of a snapshot, but over to you for your thoughts.
Oh, it does. And believe me, there's a lot of people are anxiously awaiting what that's going to look like and how it's going to kind of flow out to the unit. So we get the question all the time, and especially after you're in the commander's visit a month or two ago now. So it was good. It was a really good visit, and it generated a lot of conversation, which is good. I mean, that's what I like. It's good conversation.
Yeah, Chief. And I would say you're hurting my feelings because all the comments that I wanted to make, you kind of all stole out from underneath me. I was like, I think, well, one of the big concerns is, we're coming out of this 20-year conflict where everybody's been doing the same thing with a pretty set mission set. And one of the problem is everybody's worried about the standards and who we're selecting, who we're training, and how we're doing all this stuff. But I think you nailed it when you said that we're going to need the same type of people. We're going to need the same ground force people to do the job, whatever that job is. But I think overcoming the sanctity of the organizations and institutions is what we're running into at that wall. And how are we going to gain that flexibility to get around that? The kind of the old guard, how we see things, how we all have our set ways and patterns of doing things and getting after the mission. How do we get around those barriers to produce this flexible fighting force that the Air Force is asking us to produce?
Yeah, great question. And that one we spend a lot of time on, right? And we do, because there's certainly a lot of pride in one personal hardship, right? Going through things and having the mental fortitude to get through it, and the physical ability to get through things. That's not lost on anybody, right? And some of that just drives down risk, right? And so we certainly understand that you have people on the objective or out doing whatever it is we need them to do, and they're not going to quit, right? So that's not lost on anybody in this. I think the question we have to ask ourselves is, as we look to the future and we look at standards, nobody's talking about lowering standards. We're talking about maybe the standards are different from the standpoint of maybe now I need somebody who can do X or Y instead of, lift 500 pounds or run a 4-minute mile. I'm not saying that that's not valuable, but maybe I need somebody who speaks 3 languages and it has a 150 IQ, right? Who can do different. And that doesn't mean that you don't have folks in your formation that can speak 3 languages.
Come on now, Chief. You know that ain't happening.
I'm out.
But I say that because I think oftentimes when we talk about standards or adjusting standards, people think we're talking about lowering them. There has been zero talk about lowering standards at headquarters AFSOC, right? Our brand is on the line, right? The AFSOC brand, the special tactics brand, we value that, right? And your brand carries a lot, right? And so that's why when we talk about it, I know people are automatically going to go, they're like, hey, they're talking about lowering standards, or they're going to make it less arduous to make it through the process. That has not been the discussion. The discussion has been, what is the force we need for the future? What do we need them to do to get after special operations in the future operating environment? And I think that looks different than it is today, but it's not completely different than it is today, right? The things that make our special tactics enterprise successful today are many of the same things we need to make them successful in the future. I just think that we have to broaden our view on this a little bit to say, okay, if we're going to do some of the things in, I'll be careful here with the classification stuff, in a sensitive activities realm, some of the things that we do today may not fit into that of how we recruit, assess, and select and train people. That is what we're looking at to say, okay, in that future operating environment, what does that look like? Who do we need? And what kind of skill sets do they have to have? That's what we're talking about here. But I think some people are thinking, hey, we're just talking about getting a bunch of people that, hey, there's no standards, and hey, come on in because you can code something. That's not where we're at. That is not at all where we're at. So for your viewers out there or your listeners out there, hey, standards are going to remain high inside of Air Force Special Operations Command. I can promise you that.
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of getting that message, but I think the way I see it, and as an SR guy pushing that, projecting forward, I think the way that we look at the teams, who's part of the team and who's combat mission support, and correct me where I'm wrong, but I think those lines in the future are going to get blurred because as I'm looking forward to what my guys in particular are trying to get after, having some other career fields that have, some of the training we have, but maybe not the exact same, and us having that crossover capability to cover down on the last tactical mile. Like I said, but we have those institutions that keep us away from each other to a certain extent, and bringing those people together to accomplish that mission is where I'm seeing the problems. But am I kind of correct on that? Where we need to kind of meld everybody with certain skill sets for the greater skill set together to get after these future mission problems.
No, brother, I think you're right on that. And I think what we need to keep in mind when we have this discussion, right, to use the last tactical mile as the example, right? Now, if you're going to go do a raid somewhere, hey, I got it, right, of what you need to have on your team. But let's say, say you're going to go do something that the skills aren't inherent to that team. Right. But what that individual needs is a blocking force to get them there to do whatever that thing is to the objective. Right. And because we're on an unclass, you can probably fill in the blanks there on what I'm thinking of. Right. But that team's job would be to make sure that person who has that unique expertise can get there in that last tactical mile to get the effect that we want for the nation, because it wouldn't do us any good to train everybody to do all of those things, because what we'll end up with is a jack of all trades and a master of none. And when it's time and the nation is on the line and we need somebody to hit a button or do whatever else, that's not the time to go, do we have the right people here with the right training to do that? Because there are certain people, the example I like to use is like a nuclear scientist. We don't train everybody in the world to be a nuclear scientist, but we need a nuclear scientist to figure something out. We go to the nuclear scientist. right? I don't need to train every ST individual to be a nuclear scientist, right? So as I kind of walked it, that's what we're thinking of. But when it comes down to doing something that is going to take, like what we've done the last 20 years, absolutely, you need a set of people to do that. But you also need a set of people who can go that last tactical mile for that high-end thing that's a one-off that very few people in the world have that level of expertise on. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, Chief, it does. And I think it might be hard for some of our audience members to kind of grasp what we're talking about, but I think I got what you're putting down.
Well, okay. I mean, I tell you what, it would be eye-opening if people could hear this kind of conversation in a classified setting, because in all honesty, it's scary. Like when you really get into the no kidding, this is the truth, this is the secret, top secret information that's out there, and you kind of sit back and you go, oh wow, I had no idea, or wow, that's really scary. And I know talking to Chief Bass a couple of weeks ago, we had some other folks come in and give us some briefs, and it was just kind of like, it's one of those things where you're just trying to take all the information in, digest it, and you're like, okay, how do we get after it? And then it really helps you focus on, or at least for me anyway, is, all these things that we get upset about, or we, kind of focus on. You go, wait a minute, how does that help me defeat this competitor or this state, this country, or whatever it is? Like, does it help me? Am I focusing on the right thing? And that's really what I get out of these classified briefings all the time. So it would blow people's mind to actually hear the stuff that we get told.
Well, we've had 20 years of kinetic solutions, and I think it's hard to turn that corner into the non-kinetic solution.
Yeah, that is such a great point, right? And in the environment that we're in, and the environment we will be in, right? That's why, a level of expertise in certain things, you have just got to have it. And so I think to both of y'all's points is when you start thinking at the TS level and the like of, hey, we have a lot of smart people solving a lot of hard problems in our nation. I think what happens at times is we get sucked in a little bit too much into social media in our echo chamber. Right. No matter what that may be, whether it's what the nation's doing, what's happening with a pandemic, whatever it is, this is what happens. Right. And so we buy into the hype. But rest assured, the Department of Defense, and more specifically, Air Force Special Operations Command, we're interested in solving hard problems for the nation. And that's what we're getting after here. And so for your listeners and your viewers out there, yeah, we may not be able to delve into the classified side, but if you get on board this team, you'll figure out what's on the other side. And I think you'll be pretty impressed by what you find.
Oh, absolutely. And to your point, Chief, like to the folks that are listening and considering coming in, like, we need you. You had mentioned the cognitive diversity. Like, I think that's one of the things that makes America the strongest possible, is that not everybody comes from the same cultural background, has the same cognitive level. My strengths, pick up for, I won't say you, Chief. Well, actually, yeah, I'll say you, Chief. Your weaknesses, and then your strengths pick up for mine, and then Trent clears up the mess that both of us leave. So, so it's like we need people. And to my kind of next question is, how does AFSOC, General Clark had mentioned in the Softcast, the SOCOM's podcast. So if you guys haven't checked that out, please do, because Sergeant Major Parrish and Command Chief Olson Command Chief Smith do a very good job on there. But General Clark was on there, and he talked about SOCOM remaining the partner of choice in strategic competition and doing joint combined exchange training and that kind of stuff. So how does AFSOC kind of fit into that, ensuring that we remain the partner of choice?
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, because I think as General Clark stated, right, as you look to the future and you look at the partners and who we're going to work with and the like, this gets to our force generation model, right? And once we get our force generation model correct and synced up with the other parts of SOCOM, right, because let's face it, being the partner of choice is because they trust us, right? When we come into their country, we're going to do the right thing. Our morals and our values are right, and they align, right? And so I think as we look to the future on this, that's going to become more and more important. But that's why the fourth generation model is more important, because if we come into your country and we've got all of our stuff in one sock, and you go to partner with those nations to help them get after the things that they need to get after for whatever works best for them, hey, then we're in this together, right? And I think our partners understand that. And I think the reason we've remained the partner of choice for so many people is because when we get on the ground with people outside of whatever policy may be, we're going to do the right thing for the right reasons, right? Because that's who we are as Americans, right? Yeah, we may have somebody who makes a misstep occasionally, but that is not the norm. Right. I mean, there's always going to be one bad apple in a bushel, but that doesn't spoil the rest. And so as I look to the future, and I think about getting back to training, to your point, Peaches, about JSETs and the like, right? I mean, that's fertile ground for us, right? Because we want to help our allies and partners that are out there. And I think what we normally find is that when we go and we have a successful engagement in one country, there's another country that says, hey, when are you going to come and participate with us? Right. And I think as long as we stand by what makes us America, and then more specifically to the Air Force, if we stand by our core values of integrity, service, and excellence when you're in somebody's country, hey, this is all going to work out just fine. I won't get into what other countries may or may not do in this space. That's for somebody else to worry about. But I have great faith in our young men and women as they go out and partner with these countries to become the partner of choice. And so that doesn't worry me at all. It's a matter of we need to make sure we put our money and our time towards the things that matter and not get mired down in stuff that doesn't matter, right? And building partnerships and allies, I think, is right in our sweet spot. So that's what I think going forward.
Oh, I agree. And, going back to Afghanistan, I mean, 20 years of conflict has helped sharpen us and really, honed our TTPs and developed our medical capabilities, our recovery capabilities, our kinetic capabilities. So really, I mean, that's a good selling point when you start talking to other countries about like, hey, let's play together, let's train, let's exchange ideas and training opportunities.
As you say that, it's interesting. A few weeks ago, I got the opportunity to go to McGuire-Dix Lakehurst, for Operation Allied Welcome, right? It's where many of our Afghan guests are right now as they become, citizens and assimilate into America. And, what wasn't lost on me as I dealt with, all of our great young men and women that are out there helping these folks along with the State Department is all these people who want to come to America to live the American dream. If we wouldn't have been as good as we were in Afghanistan, you wouldn't have hundreds of thousands of people who want to come to America to live the American dream. And that's because of our military that was on the ground for 20 years, dealing with those people and engaging. Right. We would know pretty well if that didn't work, if nobody wanted to come to America, but that's not the problem. Right. They all want to come to America. And we owe many of our Afghan guests that are here now a great debt of gratitude for all they did for us while operating inside of their sovereign country. So I offer that because I think it's important. That goes to that question, right, of being a good partner and doing the right thing for another nation.
Yeah, and I think we talk about it all the time. And I know on the like the Instagrams, the social medias, people get tired of the advice because we're always like, just be a good person. And one of the things I say is that I need nerds that don't quit. But I think when we talk about it, we can't overstate the importance of who we are and how our actions affect things on even like a geopolitical scale, just by being moral and ethical, and those people that are willing to do whatever it takes, which are sometimes not the prettiest things, but also we're going to do the right thing when it counts. And so I think, you can get pretty jaded on the social media sometimes, especially in the vet side of the house sometimes. But I think that is important, is just to be that good person. And then as we move forward with recruiting and everything, being that technically savvy nerd that won't quit, however that looks in the future, is incredibly important as we push forward through this.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up, I touched on it briefly before on social media and the like, and certainly I'm not trying to get on a soapbox here or anything else. And, I think what we tend to find a good bit is what people do is, they get into that echo chamber, right? People who think just like they do, and they won't bring in any outside influence in it. And this gets to diversity again, right? I mean, if I understand where you're coming from and you understand where I'm coming from, one, we're probably going to make we're probably going to answer the problem better, number one, and two, it's going to be informed. Right. And so I think to everybody out there, what we have to be careful of, especially with the audience that you have, is just because you have a set group of friends on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever your thing is, hey, expand that out past your comfort zone. Right. To hear other people's perspectives. That doesn't mean you're always going to agree, but I'll bet you what will happen is they're going to provide something that's going to make you think. And I know for me, I'm all about it. I wasn't necessarily that way when I was younger. It took me a while to mature and kind of grow into it. And I'll tell you, you guys didn't ask me any books that I read lately, but I'm going to offer a book that I read. And many of you have heard of it. I read the book White Fragility. And, I had some people say to me, they go, why would you read that? I said, I want to know what the view is and the like. And so on the way out to Japan a few months ago, I obviously downloaded it to my Kindle and I read it. And this book was so enlightening to me about things that I had completely taken for granted, things I never thought about, things that I didn't think even applied to me until I walked through it. But and I'm not telling people on your podcast here that they need to go out and read that book. But that gets into the more you read and the more inputs you take, the more you'll be able to question how you view things in a good way. And you'll challenge your own thinking and you'll be able to challenge other people's thinking, not to change their mind per se, but to get them to look at it through a different lens. And so I really offer that, but I realize I'm a little bit older. And so I'm probably a little more malleable on some of these things. But don't get caught up in echo chambers. I guess that's the most important thing to me.
No, Chief. And I think one of the great things about the SOF community and what we've been doing for a long time is when you get out there and you travel and you see the world, I think it starts loosening up those joints inside your brain to be like, maybe the way that I think about everything is not exactly the way that the world writ large operates. But as we talk about, we are all over the world and we do a lot of different things. And you're the AFSOC command chief overseeing a pretty radically, it's crazy. All the stuff, I can't even think about it. I can't even say it, like all the stuff that you have to oversee. But what is it about all those things that you're in charge of? What keeps you up at night?
Yeah, that's, as I think about that question, I wouldn't say it's the same thing every day, but the theme is the same thing every day, right? The number one thing I'm always worried about is our airmen and our families. I mean, I am, right? Because, it doesn't matter what the crisis is, because it's much like a lot of things are local. And for instance, right, I can live here in the panhandle of Florida, and how the pandemic impacts Florida is completely different than how it impacts the 353 SAO in Kadena or the 352 SAO in Mildenhall, right? Because it's completely different, or the 22 SDS at McCord, right? Everything is just different. And so you can look around and you can go, gosh, this pandemic is really impacting things. And then you travel to places like Japan and England and you find out, oh, it's completely different for them. They're not getting off the island, right? The families haven't been home in 2 years, right? That takes a real toll on your families, right? And so for Lieutenant General Slife and I mean, that's why we've been working overtime on things like this to get certain things approved, policies lifted so we can get families out of there. How do we get them back into Japan? Working with different entities to make that happen. So, I mean, that is the number one thing that I worry about day in and day out when you look at the 21,000 person force plus the families. But probably what ranks equally to that is, are we taking the right amount of risk and the acceptable amount of risk at the right level? Right? Because we want to believe that, hey, everybody's going to make the right decision and we've given them the right education, training, and experiences, which I don't necessarily agree with, right? I mean, because you only learn how to do a lot of really good risk management by experiencing things, right? And so, I'm all about empowering down, right? The lower level we can go, the better. But you can't just blindly do that and just go, yeah, figure it out. You got it. I trust you. Right. We got to put them through the paces of that so they can learn, grow, and develop on that front. And so, there's a million other things that I worry about on a daily basis. But most importantly, it's our families and obviously our military members. And then where's the risk at and how do we buy down that risk to take best care of our formation? Right. Because if airmen are our competitive advantage, and we know that they are, if you don't take best care of them and put them in the best situations to succeed, we're failing them. And that's what keeps me up at night. But there's other things depending on the day that will keep me up at night as well.
You know what? That actually ties right into the next question I will ask you, and this is at the risk of having some hurt feelings. But you know this, Chief. We're Trent and I are senior NCOs first, and then podcasters second. So, like, what can we as senior NCOs first, and then as podcasters, like, promoting AFSOC and Air Force and the DoD at large message? Like, what are some things that we can do better as senior NCOs and then podcasters?
Yeah, I think I don't think they're separate and distinct, right? Because you guys are always senior NCOs, and then you're sometimes podcasters, right? And so what you think as a senior NCO is going to come over in your podcast, right? So I think they're actually almost the same thing. I think some things that we're probably, and I won't say everybody, that we're probably not as good at as maybe we could be. We have to remember that standards are at the core of our profession, right? Standards, right? Standard you walk by is the standard you accept, right? And so when we kind of walk through things, I think people want to be held accountable. They do. People want to be held accountable. But if you walk past that overflowing trash can as senior NCOs, then what you just told everybody else is, I guess overflowing trash cans are just fine. Doesn't really matter, right? And as simple as that sounds, standards drive everything. Standards drive risk mitigation. Standards drive everything. There's a reason why when you bring leadership out to a training event, you have a lot less go wrong. There's a reason for that, right? Because people up their game about that time, right? Because they know what the standard is, right? They're just trying to see what they can do inside of that standard. And so I would offer that to you first, right? But in line with that, I think the other thing that we have to keep in mind that, hey, we're professionals at what we do, right? We are professionals at what we do. This isn't a jobs program. Hey, you're not just getting paid on the 1st and 15th. When's my next 4-day weekend? When we start min-manning, right? If you can't tell, some of those things really grate on me, because min-manning over the holidays is not an excuse to kick work till January. If there's work that needs to be done over the holidays, get the work done. Right. If there's work that needs to be done over a 4-day weekend, get the work done. Right. And I say that not to be mean to anybody. That's not my intent. My intent is that, it's not about punching the time clock. It's about making the time count. Right. Let's come in and get after it, because as you look to the future operating environment, it's not going to get easier. Right. It's not going to get easier. And so as senior NCOs, we have got to be okay with conflict. Right. We've got to be okay with calling people out on things that aren't right. Because if I'm one of your young listeners on there, and I want to join this organization that is the tip of the spear, whatever you want to say, I expect standards to be high. I expect to be held accountable. I expect you to call me out if it's not right. But if you don't, then I go, well, I guess this is how we do it here. And then we will build a generation that does that. But what I'm always happy about is, and I believe in this, is that every generation that comes along is better than the last. They are, right? That doesn't mean they do everything better, but there's a lot of areas that they do better, right? I can remember when I came in, probably like you guys, which wasn't as long ago as me, but when I came in 30 years ago, I can remember the old timers saying to me, well, if this is what the future generation looks like, man, we're going to be in a world of hurt, right? But they did that just to get you going, right? Because they wanted to have you raise your game. Right. And now when I talk to those same individuals that are retired now, they're like, boy, we're really proud of you and your generation. Right. Because you look at what we've done for the last 20 years. Right. And we can do that in any space around the globe. It doesn't matter which competitors we're talking about. Right. And so to me, that's what it's about. So as senior NCOs, hold the line, hold the line, hold the line. Don't just go, it's just the way we do things now or whatever else. Yeah, we've got numerous policy changes that have happened. There are some people that have lost their mind over the changes in AFI 362903 or dress and appearance AFI. Hey, maybe some of those were absolutely necessary because it was stupid why we had some of those rules to start out with, right? Just because you're changing it, this goes back to the standards thing we were talking about earlier. Just because you're changing it doesn't mean that the old standard was the right standard. Right. But I'm a believer in let our people make decisions at their level as long as the risk isn't too high. So I think we could talk about this for a long time. But what I would offer is, as you guys are podcasters and you guys are looking at it, as you guys think about what's made you successful and your organization successful, as long as you're plugging that back into your podcast, I think that's all we can ask for from you guys. And I know I've listened to a few of your guys' podcasts, very impressed. I think it's super professional, and the way you guys handle it is amazing. So good on you, because it's not easy to do what you guys do.
Oh, appreciate it, Chief. Well, look at that. You've listened to some of our episodes. I'd wonder which ones, but well, cool. That's cool.
Terrifying.
All right. Well, Like I said at the beginning, Chief, we are respective of your time, and we want to make sure that you're able to get off to who you've got to meet. So thanks again for coming on. Really engaging conversation, and I think this is going to be one of the popular episodes because you covered a lot of ground, which is not surprising when you're at the command chief level that you are, and the strategic vision that you guys are working through. So definitely appreciate you coming on, and afterwards we'll have to get your shirt sized so we can send you something out.
Well, that sounds good. And once again, if I may, I just want to thank you guys for having me on today. Hey, if there's something I didn't hit or didn't catch for you guys, just let me know. It doesn't have to be about the podcast. It's just about for your organizations and units. I'm always available to you. Anything that I can offer to you. And then the other thing I would say is, hey, my thoughts I provided today, hey, those are just based on my experiences in the Air Force. Everybody's got some. I'm just giving you my perspective and sharing you where I come from. And so that's what I'd offer to you all, and happy holidays to you.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, Chief. I'll be in contact.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.